Start the webinar. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar. We will give it a couple of minutes just to let everybody join in. Again, for those of you that are joining us, welcome. We're excited to have you. We're going to give it a few more seconds just to make sure that we allow everybody some time to join, and we'll be starting shortly. All righty. Can everybody hear me? All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Mario Munoz. I am a member of the Women in Mining Arizona chapter here hosting this event. First, we'd like to say welcome and thank you for joining us for our second Lunch and Learn talk for the Twin Metals Minnesota project presented by Kathy Grall. Before introducing our speaker, we wanted to give you a brief introduction and update on our organization and why we're hosting these talks. The Women in Mining Arizona chapter, or WiM for short, is a nonprofit organization of women and men with several objectives, one of which is to promote education on technical, economic, regulatory, and other mining-related topics. To meet this commitment, we are hosting this Dig and Learn event here with Twin Metals, and we are pleased to announce that we will also be hosting various other events throughout the year and falling into the next year. So please mark your calendars for a talk about reintroducing bighorn sheep at the Morenci mine, durable repairs in extreme mining environments, and an update from the San Javier mine at the University of Arizona with a project they're working on. If you're interested in sponsoring a future Dig In event, please contact us. We'd be happy to have some more sponsors. Another outreach event that we're doing to promote women in mining and education, we've been busy with this, is a t-shirt contest and a t-shirt design. So we are asking for students and members and anybody out there to engage by providing us with some ideas on the ways that we can increase awareness and do some outreach. Here are some of the designs that we have come up with, but we're also looking for some other ideas, and we want your engagement to be able to promote and continue to have some outreach. So if you can, submit your ideas at azoutreach@womeninmining.us. And lastly, for our WiM introduction, please connect to WiM and become a member. The 2020 board meeting is coming up soon and is also scheduled for later this month. So make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and join us if you haven't already. We're always looking for more members that to help with this cause. And I'll pass it to Megan, who will introduce our speaker for today.
Hi, my name is Megan Civic, another WiM member, and I'll be introducing our speaker. Kathy Grawl is the Manager of Public Relations for Twin Metals. Her goal is to raise awareness of the importance of metals in our everyday lives and in advancing the transition to clean energy technologies. She's passionate about this project and the power of communication to help the public better understand the supply chain and how strategic minerals play a role. I'm happy to introduce Kathy Grawl of Twin Metals, Minnesota. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan, so much for that introduction. Let me just share my screen here. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. Okay. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Again, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to share the Twin Metals story with all of you. As Megan mentioned, I'm Kathy. I'm the Public Relations Manager with Twin Metals, Minnesota. And I feel really lucky to be part of what I think is truly an incredible project. Just gonna make sure this window is closed down here so it's not blocking the presentation. Okay. So I'm hopeful that you'll be able to learn something helpful for you today as I walk through some of the details of the Twin Metals project. Certainly there are some major differences between Minnesota and Arizona in terms of climate, but also in terms of the prevalence of the non-ferrous mining in our states. Although I do think there are definitely, from an industry perspective, some common issues and themes that we all experience. All right, so who are we? Who's the Twin Metals team? So Twin Metals Minnesota is focused on developing and eventually constructing and operating an underground copper, nickel, cobalt, and platinum group metals mine in Northeast Minnesota. Twin Metals is a subsidiary of Antofagasta. If you're unfamiliar with Antofagasta, they're based in Chile, and they are one of the top 10 copper producers in the world. So we're very fortunate to have their leadership and their expertise overseeing our project. This year, we're actually celebrating 10 years as a company. So we've been at this for a while now, but we have only just entered the regulatory phase of the project. We submitted our formal mine plan to state and federal agencies in December of last year. So we're really just at the very beginning of a lengthy and robust regulatory review process. So I've got just a quick video to give you a little flavor for the project area and to meet some of our staff members.
If you think back to the history of Ely, what brought people here was mining. This whole area was built on that. Unfortunately, the economy has declined. The last underground mine in Ely closed in 1967. These minerals are valuable to us because they fuel the 21st century technologies. We have them under our feet. It's important that we move forward with the mine for our future. We get a lot of visitors that come to our region the summer months and enjoy the Boundary Waters canoe area. There's a whole other side of the year that Ely really needs people here, and it's quiet. You can go through town and you don't see anyone. So having a year-round economy is something that Twin Meadows will have the opportunity to offer. Adding 700 high-paying jobs really will keep those businesses thriving year-round. We've undertaken one of the largest hydrogeologic studies of the area. We've drilled deep wells into the ore zone to understand what the water looks like. And what we're finding is we're not seeing water at those depths, because below that it's all bedrock. The density is steel. Water won't transmit through our core. And we meet or exceed any standards, it'll be the right project for Minnesota. Mining underneath this is the best conditions you can hope for an underground mine. My entire life, I've been in the Boundary Waters. Having the opportunity to bring my family into the Boundary Waters, to fish and to enjoy, allows you to appreciate the beauty and have a respect for the area. It's important that others get to enjoy that also. My name is Dean, and I want to make sure that we keep this area safe for future generations. That's why I work for Twin Metals.
All right, so that was Dean DeBelt. He's our operations and safety director at our Ely operational headquarters, and he's been on staff for almost the entirety of the existence of Twin Metals. So we're committed to our safety program that Dean leads up. So where we are, Twin Metals has offices in both the metropolitan area in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and in Ely, Minnesota. So on the top right here is our office building in Ely. That's our operational headquarters. And then on the bottom right, you'll see that's our core storage facility. So it's a 17,000 square foot facility that we're really proud of. We house about 1.5 million feet worth of core samples in that facility. And there's another 500,000 feet of core that are with the Minnesota DNR at state storage facilities. So in the past 10 years, we've drilled about 2 million feet in total worth of core samples. Right now we have 19 full-time staff members, so we are a relatively small company, but we also work with quite a few different outside consultants that support all of the different aspects of the Twin Metals project. So to get you oriented on the location of the project within the state of Minnesota, you'll see on the bottom right, the little box will show you where the project is at in the state. And the blue star that you see in the top right-hand corner of the map is representative of our project site where we're proposing for our project to be. And that's about a 15-minute drive south from Ely, the operational headquarters that I showed you on the last slide. You can also see on this map that we're at the northeastern edge of the historic Iron Range in Minnesota. Mining has really been the backbone of the economy of the region for more than 130 years. Currently, we have 6 operational taconite plants in the state, which support several thousand jobs in the area. And the state's first non-ferrous mining operation, the PolyMet project, if you are familiar with them. They're in the final stages of permitting now, and they'll be the state's first really modern non-ferrous operation. If permitted, Twin Metals will be the next non-ferrous mining project in the state. So our project is located in an area of the Superior National Forest where mining has been deemed a desired condition under the Superior National Forest Plan, along with a number of other industrial activities like logging. We're located in a very active forest, and you can see the list here. There's a number of different features and activities that happen right around our project site. And it's really important for us to point out that oftentimes opposition groups, people on the other side of the issue will claim that the Twin Metals project is going to be located in an area that is pristine, where no activity is happening, and truly there's active quarries, there's farming, there's resorts and homes, there's a lot of activity that's happening right around the project. So in the center of this image, you'll see a little red blob, and that is a surface representation of where the Twin Metals mineral deposit is located. It's called the Maturi deposit, and it is one small section of a larger Duluth complex geologic formation. So the Duluth complex in Minnesota, a lot of people here in the state don't even realize that it is one of the largest undeveloped copper nickel deposits in the world. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But our project, the Twin Metals project, is represented in that little red area that you see on the map. The dark green area in the top section represents the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. If you're not familiar with this area, the Boundary Waters was created through the BWCA Wilderness Act in the 1970s, which was enacted by Congress through really what was the compromise in order to establish the boundaries of the wilderness area and prohibit any industrial activities like mining and logging within that area, while also designating lands outside of that area for the development of industries like logging and mining. And when the Boundary Waters were created, there were two different exclusion zones created around the Boundary Waters themselves. The federal exclusion zone is the one that you can see in that little yellow line that goes around the area, and that was really to allow for access into the Boundary Waters. On top of that, the state of Minnesota established a state level exclusion zone, which you can see in the light blue area. So the Twin Metals project is outside of the Boundary Waters, and it's outside of both of the zones that are designed to protect that area from development. And we know that in the state of Minnesota, we have incredible resources, including our wilderness areas and our mineral resources. And we know that we must maintain and be able to protect both. Additionally, as you can see on the very outside of the map, the bright green line represents the 1854 treaty boundaries. So we have a number of different tribal governments that will serve as cooperating agencies on our project as we move through the environmental review process. All right, so some more details about the Twin Metals project itself. We'll get into the fun stuff here. The project can really be thought of in three different main sections. So the first would be the underground mine area, which if you can see the blue dotted line in the upper right-hand corner, that is a surface expression of where the underground mine will be. The second component would be our plant site, which is that light green color in the middle. That's where we'll do our mineral processing. And then the third would be the tailings management site, which you can see in the light orange area at the bottom there. So this is a rendering of what the plant site, that light green area that you saw in the last slide, this is what the plant site will look like from an aerial view. The total surface footprint of this site will be about 100 acres. The mineral processing building is represented by that green building on the left-hand side. And that'll be comparable in size to about a super target. You can think of it as that. We're going to be processing 20,000 tons of ore per day at the Twin Metals project. The site will also include access to the underground mine. So they're a little bit hard to see, but on the right-hand side of the gray area, there are two declines. And one of those declines will be dedicated to transporting employees and our equipment. to and from the underground mine. And the other will be used solely for conveying crushed ore to the surface to the processing plant. And getting to some of the bullets that you see at the top here, safety really is our #1 core value at Twin Metals. We've already begun implementing the National Mining Association's core safety program 9-10 years before we even submitted our mine plan to state and federal agencies. So we're truly committed to that program. And we'll talk about the mineral deposit itself on the next slide, but because we're an underground mine, we'll really have very minimal surface disturbance. We're also able to keep all of our waste rock underground. So this is a simplistic cross-section representation of the Maturi deposit and what the underground mine will look like. The technical name for our type of deposit is a contact-style mafic copper nickel deposit. Now I know that's a mouthful, but it's a little bit easier to think about it by looking at the diagram. The mineral deposit is represented by this narrow band that you can see running through the very middle of the graphic. And we're going to be mining it at between 400 and 4,500 feet below the surface. So our crown pillar is set at right at 400 feet. And if you think of the Eiffel Tower, it's at about 300 feet. That gives you a little bit of sense for how deep the crown pillar is. About 80% of our mining will occur below 1,500 feet. So it's a very, very deep mine, and we're able to really surgically extract ore because the nature of the deposit is so located in such a narrow band. For scale, Birch Lake Reservoir that you can see on the top left there, that's adjacent to our project, and it has a maximum depth of about 25 feet. There will be no mining underneath Birch Lake Reservoir. And the underground mine will be divided into 5 different zones that will be mined sequentially. And you can see the stopes, or the sort of underground rooms. You can think of them if you're not familiar with underground mining. You can see them represented by the white boxes there in the middle. The declines, so the black line that represents the declines there, it's about 1.25 miles long. And really one of the key advantages I wanted to point out of having an underground mine is we're able to do so much of the mining activity underground. So we're able to do ore crushing underground in the stopes and really reduce our impact in terms of noise and visibility on the surface because of that. We're also able to backfill up to half of our tailings as cemented paste backfill underground in order to seal off those stopes underground and provide additional stability for the mine on the surface. So the system that we'll use for mineral processing is a flotation system. A lot of you are probably familiar with this, but we will use this system to extract our minerals, and water will be reused in this whole process in a closed loop system. So we'll be doing a lot of recycling of the water in this system. We won't be discharging any processed water, and the project is also designed to not discharge contact water. The 3 final products that we're going to be producing at the Twin Metals project will be a copper concentrate, a nickel cobalt concentrate, and a platinum group metals concentrate. And those will be shipped out in containers like what you see on the bottom right here on trucks. And they will ultimately go to Duluth, Minnesota, which is not far from the project site. There's a regional port authority there, and from there they will go out for final processing. Last summer, we announced that we were adopting dry stack tailings management technology, which was a shift for us from previous project configurations that would have utilized a conventional tailings facility. So with dry stack, our tailings will be filtered using a filtration system on the plant site, and then stored on a lined ground facility adjacent to the plant site. Reclamation of the dry stack will occur in stages throughout the 25-year mine life. So really, the dry stack will not be to its full size until the end of that 25-year plan. You know, we had been looking at dry stack for a number of years prior to last year. We also heard from concerned voices in our communities. And ultimately, we determined that it's the right technology for our project. Some of the benchmark operations that we looked at that you might be familiar with include Greens Creek in Alaska. So the image on the bottom right is, you can see their dry stack facility there. They've been utilizing dry stack technology for a couple of decades, since the 1980s. Some other projects that we looked at were Pogo Mine, also in Alaska, and Eleanor in Quebec. So projects with similar climates to ours. The bottom left image is, that's an image of our filtered tailings in a lab where they're being tested right now for ideal consistency and compaction rates ultimately for the dry stack facility. So why Minnesota? I mentioned the importance of the significance of the Duluth complex geologic formation. And these are some figures to really help us ground us, help to ground us and why it's so important, why it's so critical for our domestic metal supply. And these figures are from the National Resources Research Institute. So I know Arizona is a huge producer of copper currently for our domestic resources. The Duluth complex in Minnesota represents about a third of the nation's copper reserves. We've got about 88% of the cobalt. And cobalt is one that we've really been focused on, of course, because of labor issues in some of the places where cobalt is currently coming from. We have 95% of the nation's nickel supply, which is huge, and another 51% for platinum and 48% for palladium. And I touched earlier on the historic iron mining that's been done in the state of Minnesota to date. And we all know the United States is highly import reliant on many of these minerals, and yet we are the nation, or the world's #1 user. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the impact of the Twin Metals project to the state of Minnesota and the region. So to date, Twin Metals has invested $450 million in the project. Through construction of the mine, we will have invested $1.7 billion in the region. We recently signed on to a project labor agreement for union construction labor to build the mine. And to put it into a little bit of context, building the mine itself, the underground mine and the surface facilities will be on par with constructing a professional football stadium. And it's all private investment. So this is going to be a huge economic impact for the region. Once we're operational, we'll employ 750 folks full-time, and we'll generate about 1,500 spin-off jobs. Now this is a look at the average wages in Northeast Minnesota when we compare hospitality and tourism jobs, all industries, and mining jobs. And so again, as we're looking to the future, and especially if we think about coming out of this COVID world that we've been living in, these jobs are absolutely critical for our region and for supporting the families of Northeast Minnesota. and really the economic development that comes with this type of project. So why now? I think this group is probably very familiar with why mining is so important for sustaining a modern society. But this stat in particular from the World Bank, from one of their recent climate change reports, is one that is really stunning to me, that we need to mine as much copper in the next 25 years as we have mined in the past 5,000 years. So copper, nickel, platinum group metals, cobalt, they're all incredibly critical aspects of a sustainable future. We know these metals are very important in the construction industries, the communications, power distribution, to our national defense, and for medical technologies and renewable green energy. You may have seen earlier this year, there were a number of stories about Tesla's Elon Musk essentially begging for more nickel production, nickel that's produced in an environmentally responsible and socially responsible way, because nickel is so critical in the battery technology for electric vehicles. And you'll recall from the previous slides that in Minnesota, we've got 95% of the nation's nickel resources right here in Minnesota. Copper, of course, is also essential in our transition to a green economy, to the technologies that we really need to reduce our carbon output. And with 13% of the world's population without electricity still, something that many of us take for granted on a daily basis, Minnesota really has the potential to advance the production of copper, an element that's just so critical for our electrical infrastructure and things like wind and solar. You might also be familiar with the story behind cobalt, but we know that cobalt is an important element in all of our smartphones and in many rechargeable battery technologies. Yet we know that much of the supply of cobalt is currently coming from places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, where mining practices involve virtually non-existent labor and environmental standards. Yet here in Minnesota, we have an incredible cobalt resource, and we have the ability to mine that resource sustainably and with some of the highest standards that we have in the world. So what are some of the next steps? I mentioned earlier that Twin Metals submitted its mine plan in December of 2019 to both state and federal agencies, and that was really the culmination of a decade of work by the company to get to a mine plan that we were ready to submit for environmental review. We are currently undergoing two separate processes, one at the state level and one at the federal level. So the state of Minnesota made a decision last year to proceed with the EIS process separately from the federal government, though there has been and certainly will be coordination between the different agencies at the state and federal levels on the environmental review process. So I've just got a quick video to kind of wrap things up here. This is Julie Padilla, our Chief Regulatory Officer, who's got just a couple of things to say about where we're at and what are some of the next key steps for the project.
We will be doing a lot of baseline studies, a lot of environmental data collection over the next months, as well as modeling on all of the data that we collect now and that we've collected over the past decade. We will submit those baseline studies and all of that data, and they will use that information to help support their scoping process and preparing for public hearings and comments. Both the state process and the federal process will have and what scoping really is, that process allows them to determine what is going to be part of environmental review. So it answers a lot of the questions about what the agencies and the public need to see as a part of environmental review. Permitting will come later. It comes in some parallel path, but mostly at the end of environmental review. So once we get to a final environmental impact statement, then the agencies can really formally enter into that permitting process. So we are a long way out from getting to any final decisions related to this project. And that's why it's really critical, we think, for folks to give us the opportunity over the coming years to show the science, to show the facts, to show all of the data that we're gathering so they can make really informed decisions about this project. We will be doing.
All right, so feel free to, of course, connect with us on our website and on our social media channels, reach out directly. We're happy to engage at any time and continue to have the conversation about the Twin Metals project in Minnesota.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. That was a really informational and a great presentation. We're going to move on to questions. We have a few here through the chat and through the Q&A. So we're going to go ahead and send those your way. So the first one comes from Molly, and she asks, will you have crushers at depth of the stopes or closer to the processing plant?
Let me unmute myself again here. Okay. So I will do my very best to answer as many of these questions as I can, but I'm not an engineer, I'm not a geologist, so if I need to follow up with the group here, I'll be happy to provide some written answers that can be distributed in the recording of the presentation. But in terms of crushing, the crushing will happen in the stopes within the underground mine. So all of that activity happens underground, and then the crushed ore is brought to surface on the conveyor system.
All right, the next one is, given the local climate, are there consideration for temporary storage of tailings?
Sure, so the tailings storage system will kind of operate in two different ways. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we're implementing the filtered tailings and dry stack tailings management system. So during parts of the year when it's ideal to store the tailings on surface on the dry stack, that's what we will be doing, and they go to the dry stack facility. They're compacted in a way that really sheds water. So any precipitation sheds off of the dry stack and is collected and reused within our processing system in the mineral processing site. We also, one of the advantages of having an underground mine is that we're able to backfill using it's a cemented backfill paste technology that we're using. So pumping that back into the stopes in the underground mine and closing those off as mining progresses. So we're able to, when the climate doesn't call for, if we're having very cold temperatures, if there's a lot of precipitation, that kind of thing, that's when we can switch our operations to backfilling primarily. And then when the weather is more ideal for dry stacking is when we would do more of that. So we're able to have the flexibility in our operation because of the combination of dry stacking and backfilling.
I'll pop in here with a question from the chat from Jacob. I noticed on the map that the mine area is proximal to a rather large lake. Are there any worries about superficial runoff possibly running into the lake? And a follow-up about, what about the possibility of any metal concentrates?
So in terms of the metal concentrates, we are very early on in our materials characterization program. So that's something that has to be evaluated as we go through environmental review with the state and the feds in the coming 5 to 7 years. In terms of being adjacent to, our project is adjacent to Birch Lake Reservoir, which is a reservoir that is currently dammed for providing power to one of the local utilities here. We have designed our project with safety as our #1 priority, and we aren't concerned about any runoff, and the project has been designed in a way that any water that hits our site will be collected and reused within our processing system. So currently we don't have any concerns about that, but of course we have to go through the regulatory process in order to show all of our numbers, show all of our facts to the agencies that ultimately will determine whether or not we can earn a permit to start construction on our mine.
All right, the next question comes from Michelle Lee, and she wants to know, is there any structure along the contact zone that limits the location and the size of the stopes? And also, is there any seismic activity in the area on a regular basis to consider?
These might be questions that are a little outside my comfort zone, but I can for sure follow up with that one.
Another one from the chat from Leslie was, given the local climate, are there consideration for temporary storage of tailings? I think that I addressed that one with the previous question about dry stack and backfill. I think that covers pretty much that question. Yeah.
The next question is from Sarah Richmond, and she asks, what can you tell us about dewatering required to allow underground development?
Yep, so I know we will have systems in place. There is a certain amount of water that will flow into the underground mine, and so that's part of our design. Is we will be collecting just like we'll collect water on the surface infrastructure, we'll do the same underground, and we'll be able to utilize that water that flows into the underground mine as part of our processing facility as well.
Another question that we had was, does Twin Metals have or will have any opportunities for students like internships in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said earlier, we're a pretty small team. We're a small operation right now. We did have one intern work with us this summer from the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. So we offer that on a limited basis. We've got a careers page that you can be sure to check out for any of those opportunities that come up in the future, but we're still pretty far. We've got a long way to go before we really fully develop those programs, just because we're so early in the environmental review process. We've got probably a good 10 years before we start construction of the mine. So those opportunities will absolutely be coming in the future. But I would say just check in with us and stay connected to our social channels and our website for that kind of opportunity in the future.
All right, and I think we got the final question here in the chat, as the other ones have been addressed, I believe, from Alan. And he commented, the large footprint of the mine would suggest you are going to need a number of ventilation shafts to the active mining areas. Will you be using natural gas or propane to heat that air?
That is a great question. We will have ventilation shafts. I believe there are 3. The type of heating system, I am not entirely sure. I can follow up on that one too, but that would be in our mine plan documents that are on our website, but I'm happy to look that up and provide that info as part of the follow-up.
All righty, and I think with that, we don't have any more questions in the chat. We want to thank you so much, Kathy, for presenting for us today, and thank you for we also want to thank our sponsor, Freeport-McMoRan, for helping us put this together. We want to also thank the viewers and all the participants that joined us today. Be on the lookout for future webinars that we'll be hosting each month, and also our board meeting coming up. With that, we want to just conclude our webinar. Thank you.